Welcome to Coffee Break with Rachel Vigil, taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel Vigil.
What is going on, Broncos country? 3 reasons that you maybe should be excited about what the Broncos have done for the past couple of days. And the best person to talk about that with is our very own Andrew Mason. Mace, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Rachel. How are you? By the way, happy new league year, because it's been negotiating period. But today at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, it is the new league year for 2024. And of course, that means at that moment, a lot of moves go down, including presumably Russell Wilson officially no longer a Denver Bronco.
It's crazy to think about what has happened, not only in the 2 years since Russell Wilson came, but even in just the past couple of days, because we haven't seen any of the huge, big, splashy moves, Mace, but we have seen some moves that give us a direction that people should probably be excited about.
The direction is like there appears to be a plan, and I know there are some that are going to disagree with this, but even looking at some of the restructures that have been made on contracts like Zach Allen, Ben Powers, Mike McGlinchey, all the signs are pointing to the Broncos trying to absorb the bigger cap hit for Russell Wilson this year rather than next year. You know, they could have had $35.4 million this year, 49.6 next year. If you're creating room this year, I think a decent chunk of that may go towards taking the bigger hit and getting at least closer to out of it. We'll get the details in the next couple of days in all likelihood. So there's that. And because of that, it means you have to be kind of tactical in the moves that you make. But, like, for example, Malcolm Roach, the defensive lineman they bring in from New Orleans, and I know people are like, oh, another Saints player, blah, blah, blah. He does one thing really well that the Broncos struggled at last year, and that is get a push up front in run defense and occupy multiple blockers. Last year, Pro Football Focus, their data had him with the highest run stop percentage of any player in the league with at least 100 run snaps last year, like, on defense.
That's exactly what the Broncos need.
That's the thing. The moves they make have to be targeted, and they have to, and also it's patience. I mean, if you can't go for you see first wave players that are like being signed or re-signed early, but they're not first tier players, right? This is going to be a second, third tier type of free agency. There are going to be more players coming in, mainly for kind of specific tasks and roles. And to get value, you're going to have to wait. I mean, I imagine you'll probably see as you get towards next week, and then on the other side of the league meetings, you may see the Broncos bring in some veterans on 1-year deals that maybe are getting closer to the end of their career, but they can fill a specific role right now to make sure that you can kind of keep this thing from totally going off the rails. So,
well, Mace, for me, it's like the number one reason people should be excited right now is not because, oh my gosh, they just landed, this big, huge free agent. It's because there is a plan that the rebuild is starting, and we've been waiting so many years that they have picked and plucked different players to try and figure it out. And it's just finally time. And there's a clear plan that, yes, it is actually happening. And it's going to move on Sean Payton's train in whichever direction he wants to go.
Yeah, this isn't like 2019 where you're coming off of an 11-21 record in the previous 2 seasons, 11 losses 1 year, 10 losses the next. And you're like, let's go get Joe Flacco because he's just entering his prime. Let's go get Juwan James. Let's go get Kareem Jackson. I mean, Kareem ended up being a pretty good pickup for the Broncos, but it was just this misalignment, right? It was a team that needed rebuilding, and yet you went for some reasonably big spends. Or in the case of Joe Flacco, like, what was the real upside there going into year 12? I will say this. There were some rumblings on social media yesterday. Oh, might the Broncos look to bring back Joe Flacco? No, they're not. But
Thank
briefly,
goodness.
I was
Let's
like,
not do
oh,
that.
let's not go there. And especially, here's the other thing. The type of quarterback the Broncos do bring in advance of the draft, and because I think there will be a drafted quarterback coming in at some point. But the type of quarterback the Broncos do bring in is going to be interesting because on the one hand, you want somebody who has some untapped upside. That's where the Sam Darnold conversation came in. That's why someone like Sam Howell may make sense. But you also need somebody who can be a mentor as well. Howell's real interesting because even though he's young, I asked Drake May about about sitting for a year at North Carolina. He sat behind Sam Howell, and Drake was effusive in talking about how Sam helped him, not just in terms of like the football stuff, like reading defenses, but also how to be a leader, how to interact with all your teammates, because the quarterback's got to be the leader for the entire team, right? The quarterback can't cloister himself.
Yeah.
Basically, how to even deal with media obligations. And hearing that make you think, okay, even though Sam Howell may have some upside if you trade for him and could, if you channel it right, could be somebody who is another potential quarterback of the future. If he ends up losing out to somebody that you draft, whether it's, Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix Jr., Spencer Rattler on day 2, that he's going to handle it with a lot of grace and a lot of maturity and do the right thing as a mentor for that young quarterback. So Howell might be somebody who actually threads a specific needle. Because, like, to go back to Joe Flacco, for example, remember Joe Flacco came in here and said it wasn't his job to mentor Drew Lock, right? No. So to me, that says wrong type of quarterback for what you're looking for here. Because at minimum, you want if you can't find somebody who does have some upside and could be another potential option, you want somebody who can be a good mentor for whatever young quarterback you bring in the draft.
That quote by Flacco still to this day blows my mind. Like, Mace, we know they go through media training. There is 0% chance somebody was like, this is what you should say, Joe. This is going to be the good answer for you that sticks out. It still blows my mind that quote even came out of his mouth.
Yeah, that was a wild year for Flacco between the mentor thing and then after what turned out to be his last start, throwing the play calling of Rich Scangarello and even Vic Fangio under the bus. Like, hey, why aren't we going for it? We're a 2-6 team, Oh boy, that was it's.
Hopefully there are brighter days ahead.
I hope so too. And I hope that this direction leads to where the Broncos want and need to go. I mean, because look, Sean Payton's pretty confident that he can find the right quarterback, but it's not an exact science. And the hardest thing to discern is maybe the most important thing in terms of on-field work, and that's the processor. And that's something that you are taking a little bit of guesswork on to see whether they can handle that or not.
For sure. Another thing that Broncos country should actually be excited about, even though I know some people aren't excited about it, is that the fact the Broncos didn't go spend $10 million to sign Sam Darnold, which is something you and I both agree on. There's no reason to go after that. That would be doing what they've done in years past, going and trying to get a big wig quarterback, plucking and playing him and seeing what can happen. It's just a good thing that they didn't do that, Mace.
Yeah, especially at $10 million a year. I mean,
crazy.
You are looking for something that fits cap-wise. Because, like, for example, let's say the Broncos are going to take the $53 million hit on Russell Wilson this year. Okay. So depending on whether you look at Spot Track or over the cap, what you're looking at is a significant outlay. Like, you're adding another $18 million on top of what you've already accounted for in the $35.4 million. So, or 17.6. So take that 43 or 46, and then basically you take 17.6 out right there. All of a sudden, you're looking at 26, 29 million. Now, for off-season accounting, they only count the top 51 contracts, but then you turn the page to the regular season, you're counting every contract. So you got to plan for that, and thus you got to account for the rookie pool. You got number 12 overall pick. There's that in there as well, and then on top of everything else, just various patches of holes on the roster, and then having some room to bring in some players for injuries over the course of the year. All of a sudden, can you really afford to spend $10 million on Sam Darnold? That's why if you trade for Sam Howell, even if you sacrifice a 5th round pick, his cap figure would be $984,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Mace.
That, yeah, makes sense.
Totally. And the Broncos, do we think they're done here? Like, are we going to see a move on Garrett Bowles or Cortland Sutton? Or do you think that could possibly come later on down the line?
I think the one thing we may end up seeing is a restructure on Garrett Bowles, and it restructures / extension, because it actually you can't really restructure it. It would be extension.
Okay.
And then you would knock that cap figure down. But you don't have to do it today. It could be something that you're still working on. You're in cap compliance, but then if you need to create room in a couple of days, then maybe it's something that happens. I know that they would like to find a way to have Garrett Bowles back.
Mm-hmm.
Understandably so. You don't want to blast another hole in the offensive line. You've already lost Lloyd Cushenberry. And I think Garrett Bowles wants to stay around. Every indication he's given is that he wants to stay here in Denver, where he's played for the last 7 years. And he played pretty well last year.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing. And the other thing, as far as the direction of the team, is if you're drafting a young quarterback, you want to give that quarterback the best chance possible, and that means having a good offensive line. I think that's more important than even having the wide receiver core be robust or the running game. Making sure you've got good protection up front. That's crucial. Broncos, I've said this a lot, 8th in the league in pass block win rate last year. So you're setting it up to where your offensive line actually gives a young quarterback a good chance. If you bring back Garrett Bowles and you're hoping Alex Forsythe, Luke Wattenberg, one of them can win at center. But at the other 4 spots, you're saying, hey, you know what? We're in pretty good shape here. And oh, by the way, with Miners and Powers flanking that center, they're going to help him out as well. So you're not looking at throwing the young quarterback to the wolves, and you're actually setting that quarterback up with an above average protection.
Yeah.
And that is something that no matter who it is, when they come in, is going to give them a shot. By the way, I also think Mike McGlinchey is going to look a lot better if he's got a quarterback who's not spinning into sacks, because Mike's game is guiding the edge rusher outside, using that length he has to guide the edge rusher behind and outside. And if when Russ would spin into, there were a few moments. McGlinchey got a bad rap from fans last year, and even he'll tell you it was a season where he knows he needed to do better. Yeah. But there were times when Russ did not do him any favors either. Let's be frank.
Let's be very, very honest with Russell Wilson and how many times he put himself in trouble. That's for sure. But I'm actually glad they're not going to try and blow up the entire offensive line, because I still feel like, Mason, maybe this is just me and the storylines of everything, I want there to be proof that it wasn't just the offensive line or it was just Russell Wilson. Like, to be able to have a little bit of the same thing where you can be like, oh, yes, see, another quarterback did do that. Like, it gives me just this little sense of not relief, but like, oh, okay, this was actually the problem for the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, because let's face it, if it doesn't look good up front, and if the quarterback is getting sacked, and we're putting more of that on the offensive line. Yep. And there's some good metrics out there that can kind of distill that reasonably well. And Russ goes to Pittsburgh and tears it up. Broncos country is really going to have a complex.
Broncos country would lose their minds, Mace.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, can we just real quick right now on March 13th, the start of the new league year, what do we think Russell Wilson's record will be as a Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback?
Well,
I know that's a little hard because we may not know their exact schedule and stuff, but I'm just curious if you think they'll be a postseason team. Will they be a 4-win team? Like, what do you think?
Mike Tomlin coaching that team means they won't be bad.
Okay, fair.
Okay.
So much respect.
Let's start
for him.
there. I think in the end, it'll look a lot like their recent years, 9-8, 10-7.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to look that different in the end sum from what they've been.
Okay.
Especially, I mean, that division's challenging. It's
Very.
it's Baltimore. It's Joe Burrow coming back for the Bengals. It's Cleveland. Cleveland got to the wild card round with Joe Flacco by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
If Deshaun Watson ever figures it out to be even 80% of what he was in Houston, that's a team that ought to win 11 or 12 games as well.
100%.
It's the toughest division in football, and it's a division where you very easily can go 9-8 and be in fourth place.
Do you remember when they were saying that about the AFC West, Mace? The toughest division in football. You've got Justin Herbert and the Chargers, Russell Wilson and the Broncos, Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. And here we are now.
Yeah, it does change, and it'll change for AFC North at some point. I just don't see it changing this year. I'd say the AFC West is the toughest at the top because you have the two-time defending champions. Top to bottom, it's the AFC North. I don't think there's any question about that.
Agreed. And yet Russell Wilson always puts himself in there to compete with the best, I guess. It's always interesting. Mace, anything good stuff you got going on at denversports.com? I know you had an article go up earlier this morning on Lil Jordan Humphrey sticking around.
Yeah, well, on Lil Jordan Humphrey, going to probably do kind of a reset on things as the new league year begins. And just really this week, it's about kind of just being on top of everything. Some of the longer term stuff I've been working on is probably going to be more into next week. There's a piece I've been sitting on that I get where I gathered stuff at the combine. We're talking about, and it actually plays well into these moves going on. Let's face it, these moves that the Broncos are making, they're not moving the needle, right? In terms of the sports zeitgeist, in terms of the nationwide view of the NFL. Which tells you that there may be other moves, other people coming in who matter more. And I talked with people at the combine about Jim Leonard, the Broncos' new defensive backs coach / pass defense coordinator. And the reviews on him, absolute raves all around. He may be the Broncos' most important non-quarterback addition to the team this offseason. And at some point, I'll have a piece of that on that at denversports.com.
Amazing. Well, again, 3 reasons Broncos country should be excited. Number 1, there seems to be a plan in place for the future. Even if it's going to hurt the short-term future, the long-term future is what matters. Number 2, Malcolm Roach. I think people should get really excited about it and what he's going to bring to this defense. And number 3, the fact that the Denver Broncos aren't spending buku bucks on another quarterback like Sam Darnold. 3 reasons you should be excited if you are Broncos country. Andrew Mason, appreciate your time as always.
Always a pleasure, Rachel. Thanks for having me on.
And to everybody in the comments, you guys know I love reading them. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today on this Wednesday. We will be back 10 a.m. tomorrow morning for another episode of Denver Sports Daily. And make sure you tune in at 4 p.m. to hang out with Cecil and Mace, of course, on Orange and Blue today. We will see you guys all later. Get back to work, everybody. Bye.